about the type of lifestyle and opportunity that this region now provides that it didn't used to provide, I would say, 5, 7, or certainly 10 years ago.
Callum, would you like to comment on that in terms of what impact the economic backdrop of the OECD world is having on employment habits here?
Well, I mean, in response to the question, I haven't personally come across too many people that look at it specifically from the perspective of job opportunities in a few years' time, but I have come across both companies and individuals that talk about raising cultural awareness and mobility awareness amongst young people. So I think that when we do work with organizations, we quite often look at the generations that exist within their workforce, and it's clear that Generation Y, people born 80s onwards, lend themselves very well to mobility postings and also aren't necessarily looking for cash incentives to move like Generation X and older people may have done in the past, but are looking for career development opportunities and life experiences to move around the world. So I think a lot of people may look at an international assignment as a way in which to gear up their children culturally and from a psychological perspective to be more equipped to deal with a more mobile and transient world that we're almost certainly facing and likely to face to an increasing extent in the future.
We have another question here in table number 1.
Yes, my name is Ravish. I'm the Chief Human Capital Officer for a multinational called Zafco in Jebel Ali. Well, my question is that I'm facing a challenge with my boss when he says that let's have a variable pay component into the expat package. Let's have a lesser fixed pay component and a better,
just
more
speak into the mic directly.
Yeah,
if you want to bring it around, it's probably a bit easier. Yeah, there.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. More a variable expat package than a fixed expat package. Now, while he's telling this, he's looking at the people from the first-time expatriates as well as the people who are looking for changes within UAE. Now, while working at a package like this, a fixed package and a variable package, do the panelists can recommend there are some good models to follow? Are we ready for a model like this? And if so, is there a model to follow?
Anthony, would you like to tackle that? A variable expat package versus fixed. I know that during the boom years of Dubai and the region, there was a sense to move to that because the employers were being increasingly facing very heavy costs because of rent, and they kept having to follow it rather than the other way around. But what's your thoughts on that?
I'll follow on for the first question and come on to this one, because it's part of the same thing. We start with education. 10 years ago, people came to somewhere like the UAE, and there was a package for boarding school. So children went to school to answer that question, and they felt they were culturally aligned, which is the point you were making earlier, especially for long-term expats. And that's changed, and there was an education infrastructure, and there's a lot of money went in. There still is money going into education, especially in Abu Dhabi and Qatar, in this part of the world, where people are staying here and being part of the system. What's then happened is a lot of employers are, as you said earlier, are giving people a cash package, and so they're choosing where to send their kids to school. On top of that, now employers are now looking at that cash package and giving people the choice. At one time there wasn't a choice, so you could fix your cost. So if you lived in somewhere like Bahrain, there was one school you could probably go to if you were British, and it was the British school that you paid, and people would generally know what the cost was for that institution. Now in somewhere like the UAE and some of the other more developing parts of the region, it's much easier and less onus on the employer to be involved in that area. And I'm assuming that within your department, this is taxing you and taking a lot of your time and energy looking at this element, and you're having to employ people to deliver this. It's a lot easier, I'd argue, for you to say this is what we're going to pay somebody, and leave it up to the individuals to make the decision.
On that point, is moving from a fixed package to a variable a greater burden for you? Yeah.
What's happening is that the fixed cost, which is hitting the bottom line, is what has been addressed. If there is a performance-based variable compensation payable to an expatriate, then that becomes less taxing on the bottom line of the companies. That's what is the kind of concern that probably the CFOs and CEOs are now facing.
At the top end, one of the biggest changes in packages in the last year has been not a reduction on the overall package, but in how the package has been placed. So there's more onus on people earning their bonuses rather than having them guaranteed, and therefore the share of risk between employer and employee. And that has been a net result of the last couple of years.
Callum, you wanted to jump in there?
Very, very similar comment, really. I think Simon talked about a number of areas where the labour market needs to evolve at a macro level. At a more micro level, the package certainly is evolving and needs to evolve further. If you look at more mature and developed markets, then much higher proportions of an individual's package is termed pay at risk. So short-term or long-term bonuses which depend on both the company and the individual performance. In this market, historically, large proportions, 80-90% of the total compensation package have been fixed, guaranteed to the individual, which raises obviously the fixed cost for employers in a region. So a lot of work that we've been doing with clients over the last three or so years has been around increasing the elements of variable pay, short-term and long-term bonuses within the typical package.
What percentage, if I might ask, of your employees actually enjoy a thing called an expat package?
Almost 100% of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Send me your email address. That's quite extraordinary. Rabia, in addressing that question, how relevant is that in a sense? Then how as a trend that 100% of people are enjoying that, given the stats that you're experiencing?
Maybe I'll tie it to the initial question. Over the last couple
You
of
just
years,
switched yourself off rather than on. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. So over the last couple of years, I get asked continually, have we seen salaries decline? And we haven't seen salaries decline. So take-home pay over the last couple of years, at least the base parts of it, have been quite steady. And where employers have had some ability to be flexible is in the variable pay based on performance. So as opposed to guaranteeing an increase every year, employers have increasingly gone back to their staff and said, okay, this year you get a raise if you hit these performance metrics. And so that's been a great model and has proven some success because it's a wonderful way to retain people without having to necessarily increase the fixed overhead element. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, given that he's described 100% of his employees are enjoying some profile of an expat package, I'm wondering if your research is indicating it's much less.
So again, it comes back to what the definition of expat is. If the definition of expat is there's a housing allowance and a ticket home, that's pretty much true across all companies in the UAE. Pretty much everyone pays a housing allowance, and the reason they do that is not because they really want to house people, but it helps reduce the end-of-service benefits. So from a pay perspective and a legal perspective, it makes a lot of sense, as does the ticket home. So more perks means less end-of-service liability. And if that's
but if you move to a variable expat package, then that burden is going to become greater on the employer, isn't it?
So generally those two elements remain. So you have the three fixed elements, which are, and generally there are four fixed elements. The first is basic, then there's housing, then there's some sort of transportation, and there's some sort of insurance. Those are quite, we see those pretty much being constant everywhere. And then the variable pay is variable. It's based on performance. And companies are very happy to pay that as long as the individual or the company performs.
Any question from the floor? David?
Sure. David Hunt, Head of Insurance for HSBC Bank Middle East. Anthony, what are you seeing as the trends in GCC talent? Are companies having to pay a premium for GCC talent, and how mobile do you see it across the region?
One of the, as I mentioned earlier...
David, you're referring to local talent, Gulf citizens, if you like.
There is a huge need for GCC talent. We conducted a survey last year for one of the government entities in the region where they were looking to identify the diaspora of their talent who'd gone over to North America and Western Europe. Typically, they go to some of the best universities in the region and they stay there. And the trend when we looked at what they'd been studying was engineering, which is something historically been a big source here. But most of these individuals